At 14, I heard the words that shattered my world. "You're not my son anymore." My father's eyes were cold, his voice certain, and in that moment, everything I believed about family collapsed. He walked away without looking back, leaving me and my sick mother to survive alone. I remember standing at that door, hearing the echo of his steps fade into silence. A silence that became my only companion for years. I never imagined that one day that same man would come back, begging me for the very thing only I could give. Now, years later, I'm not that rejected boy anymore. I built my life from the ground up, turned pain into purpose, and created a business that changed everything. But just when peace seemed within reach, the phone rang, and the past I'd buried came roaring back. My father was dying, liver cancer, and the doctor said I was the only one who could save him. The man who once rejected me now needed my forgiveness to survive. After that day, silence became louder than any words. My father's absence haunted every corner of our small house. My mother tried to stay strong, but her health was failing. And I was just a boy trying to fill a man's shoes. I remember coming home from school to find her coughing, her body too weak to stand, yet she'd still smile and say, "We'll be okay." Deep down, I knew she was lying, not to me, but to herself. At school, I wasn't like the other kids. I didn't fit in, I didn't understand their jokes, and they didn't understand me. Having mild autism made everything harder. Conversations, friends, even trust. Teachers called me slow. Classmates whispered behind my back. Every insult was a reminder of my father's rejection, like he had placed a label on me that the world could now see. I felt invisible until the pain turned into something else. Determination. Nights were the hardest. I'd study under a dim light while my mother slept, her labored breathing echoing in the room. There were days we had no food, days I'd walk miles to odd jobs just to buy her medicine. Each hardship carved strength into me. Every tear I wiped became fuel. I promised myself that one day I'd build a life so big that no one could ever look down on me again. But dreams don't grow easily in cracked soil. When my mother's illness worsened, I dropped out of school for a year to care for her. Friends disappeared. Relatives turned their backs. They said we were bad luck. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection and barely recognize the boy staring back. Skinny, exhausted, but burning inside with something unbreakable. I learned early that survival isn't about strength. It's about purpose. When she passed away, I felt the world collapse a second time. She was all I had left and the only person who ever believed in me. I stood by her grave and made a silent promise that her sacrifices wouldn't be in vain. That I would rise not out of revenge, but because she taught me never to quit. The wind was cold that day, but inside me a new fire began to burn. I packed what little I had, a few clothes, an old notebook, and my mother's necklace, and left that broken town behind. I didn't know where I was going, only that I couldn't stay trapped in the shadow of a man who'd erased me. With every step, I repeated the same words she once told me. "You are more than what they made you believe." I didn't know it yet, but those words would guide me to the life I was destined to create. The city was loud, fast, and nothing like the quiet pain I'd left behind. I slept in tiny rooms, ate cheap meals, and worked any job I could find. Some days I'd clean tables, other days I'd stack boxes in warehouses until my hands bled. But every night I studied. I devoured books on business, technology, and people, trying to understand the world that had once turned its back on me. I didn't want pity, I wanted progress. My first idea was born out of desperation. I started fixing old electronics, selling them online, and saving every dollar. I failed more times than I can count. Lost clients, got scammed, even slept on a park bench one night after my rent ran out. But I refused to stop. I remembered my mother's voice, soft yet unshakable. Every small step counts. So I took another and another until those small steps became my foundation. Then came the breakthrough. A client noticed my honesty and work ethic and offered me a partnership in a small tech startup. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a chance. The kind I'd been waiting for my whole life. I poured every ounce of my soul into it. Late nights, missed meals, constant rejection. But for the first time, people began to see me not as the boy who didn't fit in, but as someone who made things happen. Years passed, and that startup grew beyond anything I imagined. My name began to carry weight. The boy who once begged for acceptance was now signing contracts, hiring teams, and changing lives. I'd walk into meetings wearing the same calm look my father once called weak, and watch powerful men fall silent as they realized who I'd become. Success didn't heal me, but it gave me the power to choose what kind of man I wanted to be. Still, even surrounded by success, there were nights I couldn't escape the past. I'd stare at the city skyline from my office window, wondering if my father ever thought about me. Did he regret it? Did he ever feel the emptiness he left behind? Sometimes the silence I'd once known came back, not from pain, but from unfinished questions. I had everything, yet something inside me still felt unresolved. And that's when the call came. A strange number lit up my phone late one evening. The voice on the other end trembled. "Your father, he's sick. It's cancer. He doesn't have long. And you're the only one who can save him." For a moment, the room spun, the walls seemed to close in. After all these years, the man who destroyed me was reaching out, not to say sorry, but to survive. When I first heard his name again, it didn't feel real. My father, the man who once told me I'd never be enough, was now lying in a hospital bed, fragile and dying. The doctors said his liver was failing fast and that he needed a donor with a rare genetic match. That match was me. For years I had imagined what I'd say if I ever saw him again, but not like this. Not when he was weak, helpless, and begging for the same life he once threw away. I drove to the hospital in silence. Every mile felt heavier, like I was carrying the weight of every unanswered question. When I walked into that sterile room, I barely recognized him. His skin was pale, his eyes sunken, but when he saw me, they filled with tears. "Son," he whispered, his voice trembling, "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking for it anyway." I stood there frozen, torn between anger and compassion. For the first time, he looked small. The days that followed were chaos. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years called, pleading with me to help. "He's your father," they said, as if those words could erase the pain of abandonment. Part of me wanted to walk away, to let fate deal its final card. But another part, the part my mother raised, couldn't ignore a man's suffering even if he'd caused mine. I hated that my heart still cared. One night I visited him again. He looked up weakly and said, "You've done well for yourself. I saw you on the news once." I was proud. That word, proud, hit me like a blade. Where was that pride when I was 14 and starving, when Mom was dying? I clenched my fists, trying to keep my composure. "You don't get to say that now," I whispered. But deep inside, something cracked. Not because of what he said, but because I finally saw the truth. He was just a broken man running out of time. The doctors confirmed it. My liver was the only one compatible enough for the transplant. I remember staring at the report, feeling the universe testing me. All my life I'd been fighting to prove I didn't need him. And now, life was telling me he needed me. I spent that night walking under the rain trying to decide what kind of man I truly was. Revenge felt easy, forgiveness felt impossible, but doing nothing felt worse. When I returned the next morning, he was asleep, breathing weakly under a sea of wires. I looked at him for a long time, remembering every wound he'd left behind, and every lesson that pain had taught me. Then I whispered, "You may not deserve this, but I do. I deserve peace," and with that I signed the papers to begin the procedure that could save his life. The life of the man who once destroyed mine. The morning of the surgery felt unreal. As I was prepped for the procedure, I kept staring at the ceiling lights, remembering all the nights I had slept hungry, praying for someone to care. Now I was about to risk my own life for the man who made me feel unwanted. The nurses spoke softly, but their voices faded into the background. All I could hear was my mother's last words echoing in my mind. "Forgive not for them, but for you." I didn't fully understand it then. I did now. Hours later, when I opened my eyes, everything hurt. My body, my heart, my memories. The room was cold, but there was a strange calm inside me. I survived, and so did he. The doctor said the surgery was a success. I turned my head and saw him through the glass window, unconscious but alive. For a moment I couldn't tell if I felt relief or sorrow. Maybe it was both, because saving him didn't erase what he'd done. But it ended the war inside me. Days passed before he was strong enough to speak. When I entered his room, he reached for my hand with trembling fingers. "I don't deserve what you did," he said, tears filling his eyes. "I failed you as a father, but I never stopped thinking about you. Every day I lived with the weight of what I did." I didn't say anything. I just looked at him, not with hatred, but with the kind of distance that comes from healing. "You don't have to say more," I finally whispered. "I already forgave you the moment I decided to help." That conversation didn't erase the past, but it gave it meaning. For the first time, I saw him not as the monster who abandoned me, but as a flawed man consumed by regret. And maybe that was enough. The truth is, forgiveness doesn't change what happened. It changes you. It turns scars into strength and pain into purpose. I didn't save him because he earned it. I saved him because I refused to let hate define who I became. Weeks later, as he recovered, he asked if we could start over. "I can't give you back the years I took," he said, "but maybe I can be the father you should have had." I smiled faintly, knowing we could never go back. But we could move forward. I told him I didn't need a father anymore. What I needed was peace. And somehow we both found it that day, sitting in silence, letting forgiveness do what time never could. When I left the hospital, the sun was setting, golden light spilling over the city skyline. I thought about the boy I once was, the one who felt broken and forgotten. He finally got his closure. My mother's necklace hung around my neck, and I could almost hear her whisper, "You did the right thing." I smiled, not because I saved my father's life, but because I saved my own soul from the weight of anger that had followed me for years. Life has a strange way of coming full circle. The boy who once begged for love ended up saving the very man who taught him pain. But in doing so, he discovered something far greater. the strength to let go. Sometimes forgiveness isn't about giving someone a second chance. It's about giving yourself permission to heal. Because when you stop letting the past define you, you finally become free to write your own story. One built on compassion, not resentment. And if this story moved you, don't miss the one appearing right here on the screen. The incredible story of the boy who was sold at just 1 year old, but turned his suffering into strength and built an extraordinary life. It's a journey of pain, courage, and triumph you'll never forget. Click and watch it next, because it might just change how you see destiny forever.